Grab your cocktail and get ready for this episode of the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast. Welcome to the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things Freemasons while drinking an old fashioned. I'm Brian, and again, we're continuing with our international flair, maybe galaxy flair, maybe, I don't know, universal flair. So I say all that as I stumbled all over myself. It's my pleasure to introduce Justin Randle. Justin, welcome.
Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, followers, you saw from the thumbnail coming in. What's this sci-fi? What's this fantasy crap that you're talking about, Byrd? It's not crap. Bear with us, but we got to know all about Justin before we can get into the nuts and bolts of it. So, Justin, have you ever seen an episode?
I have. So the most recent one I watched was Kadim's episode where he's talking about traveling, visiting lodges, particularly in Africa, as well as a bit in France and such.
Yeah. He's an amazing human, and
Oh,
I,
definitely.
I think it translated well on video, so we were very excited. So, as you know on the podcast, we like to know as much about the man as we do the Mason. So, push masonry to the side. Who's Justin?
Oh, okay. Do you want the long version or the short version?
The one that'll keep our attention span of our viewers. I'll let you go with that.
Fair enough. So I was born in Vegas. I was raised in Michigan, just outside Detroit. U.S. Air Force veteran. So I joined the Air Force at 18, just out of high school. Went in, did 4 years as a PMEL journeyman, which is calibration. Um, Got out of the Air Force, continued doing calibration. Funny thing about that, I hated it when I was in, and then I found a passion and love for it when I got out. So I've continued doing that now. I've been doing calibration for nearly 20 years now. It's hard to think about. Moved to the UK back in 2015. My father was from England, so I've got family over here. I'm about 20 minutes up the road from where my dad grew up. So yeah, I've been living here 8.5 years now, and I haven't looked back. Absolutely love it.
Nice family.
Yes, so I got married back in 2019. Double check the date. Yeah, back in 2019, so just before COVID. She is very happy about that because initially I wanted to wait until 2020. I wanted to give it another year. So yeah, we got married 2019. You know, most people do these days. But my partner, Jules, she's an academic. She teaches at a local university. She's a classicist, particularly ancient Roman and Greek history. She runs her own podcast, which yeah, I mentioned to you before.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
her little thing, not mine, I'm afraid.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, we had a son back in 2021. So I've got a little 3.5-year-old, as my missus puts it, a three-nager at the moment, who I just heard is still refusing to go to bed.
So there is a 6 hour time difference, I think, from Central to
Yes.
to London. So, however, wherever you guys are watching, just know that there was a 6 hour difference. So,
Yeah, it's about 8:15 here.
right, nice. So, and so I'm assuming you still do the same vocation in the UK as you did in the States.
Yes. So like I said, I've been in calibration that long. Thankfully, when I moved over here, it's one of those fields where there's no real, I mean, there are certificates you can get and such, but my military training speaks for a
Translated.
lot of it. And then, of course, my career and on the job training and such.
Yep.
So when I moved over here, it was just a matter of, well, a lot of the companies I've worked for are international, so they're familiar with the line of work and the training that I've received. So yeah, I got a job. It was initially on site working at Jaguar Land Rover when I moved over here. Since then, I've worked, commercial labs, automotive industry, aerospace industry, materials testing, which is what I'm doing now. And I'm actually I did attend university for a little bit in the States before moving over here, and I found a passion for law at the time, but decided to kind of move over, start over fresh over here. So I'm now looking back into potentially going back to school, pursuing the legal track.
Nice.
And it's way different over here because, a law degree here is a 3-year degree. It's an undergrad degree. You get that, you go through your 1 year follow-on training, and you can practice law.
Well, they're
unlike the
probably
UK.
less litigious there than they are in the States.
In my experience, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely a bit less litigious. I'm hoping to go what they call the barrister route. We'll see how that pans out because over here you have solicitors and solicitors are more your standard lawyers, what you would normally think of. In the UK, in order to argue a case in court, depending on the level of the court. So if it's a crown court, a higher court, you have to be a barrister. It gives you what do they call it? The right of audience. So that allows you to actually go into the court and plead
Makes
your
sense.
client's case. A solicitor cannot do that in this country,
Makes sense.
even though they might study the same exact type of law. They wouldn't be allowed to
To
go
be
into
a
those
trial
higher.
lawyer.
Yeah, they can do it in lower courts, but not the higher courts.
Makes
So
sense. Makes
they're
sense.
the ones that wear the fancy wigs and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering if that was going to come up. So, all right, so we got Justin the man. So let's walk us through your Masonic journey from the beginning, kind of the abridged version, and kind of where you're at now, because we want to get into some other things.
Sure, definitely. So I growing up in Michigan, we used to always buy our Christmas tree from the local Masonic Lodge. They did it every year as a charity fundraiser. So we used to always go there. They'd usually have, of course, a pancake breakfast downstairs while they were selling the trees. So used to hang out there around Christmas time. My father being English, he had a lot of familiarity with Freemasonry. Not a Mason himself, but always had a desire and an interest. But unfortunately, he passed before time or circumstance could allow him to join.
Right.
So I joined the forces when I was stationed in New Mexico. I was on the honor guard, base honor guard in the Air Force, and one of the guys I noticed he was wearing a Masonic ring. So we got chatting a little bit, and he got me a petition. I went for my interview. It was I'd done my research beforehand, so I knew what I was walking into, but it was a Prince Hall Lodge. So I sat down at my interview, and the guys kind of looked at me and they're like, there's a White Lodge down the street, right?
Fascinating.
And I told him, yeah, I've done my research. I know there's no difference other than your history. And for me, I just want to be a Mason and I know people here. So I ended up joining Prince Hall Lodge number 11 in
That's
2009. And that's under the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of New Mexico.
okay.
So just in your neighborhood, not too far from you.
Yeah, not far.
Yep. So I joined there 2009 and initiated Passed and Raised. From there, I then joined Sacramento Lodge number 24, which is Grand Lodge of New Mexico, AF and AM. I did that out of convenience because I was getting ready to move back to Michigan.
Yep.
And, I was still a young Mason. I didn't really know how demitting and transferring and all that would work. I just thought it'll make the process easier because my hometown lodge was a non-Prince Hall lodge.
Exactly right.
Yep. So I joined Sacramento Lodge number 24, moved back to Michigan, joined Walled Lake number 528, Grand Lodge of Michigan, F and AM. From there, I then joined Detroit number 2, which meets in the Detroit Masonic Temple, largest Masonic temple in the world, if you're unfamiliar with it. But I joined that lodge. I, met a couple guys there who I got on really well with, and it was like a breath of fresh air, really, going to that first lodge meeting there. Because aside from the venue that they hosted it in, it was one of the youngest lodges I'd ever sat in.
Yep.
So I think at the time the average age in there was around 40.
Wow.
Most of the guys were, late 20s, mid 30s, I'd say
Energy
give or
levels
take.
way different too.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, we used to go out afterwards. They had a Shriner bar. One of the, or was it a Shriner bar? No, no, no. What it was one of the members owned a bar and he set up a private room for Masons and Shriners when they came in. So we used to go there, you know, drinks and cigars after a lodge meeting.
Yeah.
But that really reinvigorated me and my masonry at that point. So then 2015, moved to the UK. I visited a lodge in early 2015 on a trip over here. And when I moved over, that was the lodge I ended up joining because it was only about 15 minutes up the road from my grandfather's house.
Yep.
And that's St. Bartholomew Lodge number 696, which falls under the Provincial Grand Lodge of Staffordshire, United Grand Lodge of England. So I'm still a member of that lodge. I now, in the UK, I refer to that as my mother lodge. Prince Hall number 11's my mother lodge. Usually, if I'm talking to people, I say my UK mother lodge is St. Bartholomew number 696.
Right.
And then around 2019, what was his role at the time? I think at the time he may have been he was the assistant provincial grand master eventually, and I think he was at that point as well. He was doing an official visit to St. Bartholomew. I had a chat with him at the bar. I heard him mention something about a science fiction lodge. And he was telling me about a conversation he was having with another past master, who's the assistant provincial grand secretary, about, if there was a lodge made up of science fiction characters, who would be in what offices. And they were going through and making a list of, oh, well, Kirk would be your captain, and, you might have Gandalf as your immediate past master, and Quark as your treasurer, and going through the list. I mean, I'm pointing out all the mostly Star Trek references, but there were others as well.
Right.
So we got chatting, and he said, this is something I'm looking into. I'm thinking about starting it up. A couple months after that, I saw the announcement on Facebook, and a flyer came out saying, if you're interested, come along. We're going to have a preliminary meeting. So I went to that. This was late 2019, and there were about 45 of us. And I mean, we had further interest across the country, but that was who actually showed at that meeting.
And
Um,
Justin, let me jump in. So this would be maybe what we call in the States, this is going to be the formation of a new affinity type lodge, correct?
I apologize, you froze for a moment there.
Right. So this would be in the States what they consider like a affinity type lodge.
Yes, so we call them special interest lodges in the UK, but yes, the equivalent would be an affinity lodge. So we had our initial meeting 2019. Of course, COVID hit just as we were ready to all sign the petition to Grand Lodge. So during that, the petition got sent around to all of us. We put our signature on it, met up once kind of after lockdowns lifted to put the final signatures on it, sent it off to Grand Lodge. There was a little bit of back and forth over, our original lodge logo. Eventually, we got that approved, and province set a date, and we were consecrated in July of 2021, 2022. I'd have to double check the date. I think it was 22. Yep, 2022.
Nice. So let's talk about the science fiction and fantasy lodge. So you're the current master.
Yes, sir.
So two things. I've got all sorts of visions of what the attire are, so I'm sure you're going to correct me. So let's go with that before I talk to you as your number one goal as a master. So I'm visiting the UK and I say, man, I'm going to go see Justin, and Justin says, come on over to the science fiction and fantasy lodge. And I say, okay, I didn't bring my cloak with me. What do I wear? And you're going to tell me what?
Lodges as a special interest lodge. Our lodge meetings are strict emulation. Everything is done the same as anywhere else you'd see, with a couple little implements like our deacons carrying lightsabers instead of a what we call a wand over here, or a staff in the US. Instead of carrying that, we have Mjolnir, Thor's hammers for our gavels. But in the lodge room, it is suited and booted. So you are going to wear dark suit, dark tie, or specific Masonic ties, because there are certain approved ones under the United Grand Lodge of England.
Correct.
Um, or what they call Masonic dress in the UK, that or Masonic uniform is another one, which is essentially black blazer and morning dress trousers. And morning dress, they stripy trousers they call
Right.
them. They're black and gray striped trousers, and then waistcoat.
Okay.
So costume wise, where you'd want your cloak if you were to come and visit us, that would be at our festive board. So anything in the lodge room, purely Masonic, exactly what you'd expect in any other lodge in the country. Where we really have our fun is at our festive boards. Cosplay is encouraged, not required. So we have plenty of members who don't partake, and we have plenty of members that do and go all out for it. Um, but if you wanted to, you could bring costume, change into it before the meal, and come have dinner with us in a costume. And at our last meeting, we had some prizes to hand out for, best costume and, needs a little work, that type of stuff.
Love it. So I've mentioned on the podcast before, and you and I talked about this kind of before we started the episode. I love affinity lodges for one reason and one reason mostly. Your Freemasonry and my Freemasonry look different. But if we have options for different brothers to perform the same ritual, but have a little bit of a different twist to it, why not? Because those affinity lodges, frankly, might be saving the fraternity from tanking a little bit more than we are. Fair or unfair?
Oh, definitely fair. I think it's one of those where, special interest lodges in the UK have really taken off. I mean, I know of another one that's opening soon, which is going to be like a gaming special interest lodge, board games, video games, etc. Military lodges are a big thing over here. I know of a what do they call it? Essentially for people, I wish I could remember the name of the lodge, but it's essentially for people with an interest in railroads and trains and such.
Okay.
You get sports ones, so there's plenty of rugby and football special interest lodges.
Why not? Why
Yeah, I
not?
know, because at the end of the day, and I don't think it's a rule per se, but it tends to be kind of the norm, is if you're a member of a special interest lodge, belong to 4 or 5 different lodges, but they will always remain a member of their mother lodge.
Right.
It's not like it's pulling us away from the other lodges to join these special interest lodges. I'm still a member of my UK Mother Lodge, but I'm also a member of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Lodge. But yeah, if we had initially it was I think 42 and then it went down slightly. I think we ended up with around 30, 35 founding members of the lodge. Since we've consecrated, I think our biggest meeting yet was 105 in attendance.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and we have members from all over the country. We've got guys that come, I say all the way up north. It's a much smaller country than the U.S., but we get people that come. I think as far north as Yorkshire, they come down. We get guys that come up from London. We've
How
got a
many
couple members
hours? How many
from
hours do they
Wales.
drive into lodge?
I think a couple of them have driven 4 or 5 hours to come to a meeting. But we only meet 4 times a year. So, we
Okay.
meet 4 times a year on a Saturday morning, and it ends up being a full day event,
Sure
really.
does.
But yeah, we have interest all over the place. We've had interest from Americans as well, and further afield. We've just haven't kind of worked out how that's going to work with if we want to extend international membership, how we're going to manage it.
Yeah, that makes sense. How are the lodges in general different in the UK than they are in the US?
Ooh,
What's the
various,
biggest
various.
what's the biggest difference? Is it attire?
I'd say, well, yes and no, because my Prince Hall Lodge, I was raised with you always wear a suit and tie to lodge, and I've kept that even when I joined the other lodge in New Mexico, Sacramento Lodge. I'd go there, there'd be guys, cowboy hats,
Yep.
jean overalls, you
Yep.
know, cowboy boots. I'd still be suit and tie. So I've always kind of carried that with me. So you do get that a little bit. I know other states as well where that's pretty much the norm to wear suit and tie to lodge.
Yep.
Ritual is probably a big one. I'd say American ritual, so the Preston Webb ritual tends to be a bit more flowery in its language, I think is the best way to put it. I actually really like it. I mean, it's more verbose in certain
Right.
respects. I
Right.
really like it. Another big one is in the I'm trying to remember now. Primarily in the third degree, you would notice it. You would notice it in the first and second degree as well. So in UK lodges, after uh, in a US lodge, the third degree, there's a second section that's kind of acted out.
Sure.
The brethren take a role and
Yes.
act it out. In a
Understood.
UK lodge, it's given as a lecture.
Okay.
So that is well in I say UK lodge in a UGLE lodge. That's how it's done, especially an emulation lodge because again we have multiple rituals that are used in the UK. Some lodges may act it out. I haven't been to them to say for certain. I know if you go up to Scotland or over to Ireland, it tends to be more like American Freemasonry because that's where a lot of that influence on American Freemasonry came from.
Makes sense.
But in UGLE emulation lodges, yeah, it's a lot more. you're the candidates being talked at by the various officers, which
Right.
I do miss the acting it out bit. I
Sure.
must.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. So, why do you think why do you think more men in general aren't joining Masonry now?
Well, I mean, for a long time, it was always one of those things. We used to blame it on the hippie generation, if you will, because their dads were Masons, their grandparents were Masons, their great grandparents were Masons, and then they were the rebels. They were the ones who, we don't want any part of what our parents
Came
did.
back from Vietnam, they didn't love me, blah blah blah.
Exactly. And I think you had that disconnect there. So following that, you then had a generation that didn't join and they weren't passing that on to their children. And then now though, I can't speak to the US because it's been 8.5 years since I've sat in a lodge in the US. I take that back. I've sat in one once last time I visited a couple of years ago. But that being said, over here I see some of those younger guys, they're starting to feel like something's missing. They're missing that camaraderie. They're missing, like I tell my wife, for me, it's one night a month I can go hang out with the guys, and I know it's always going to happen. This one night every month, I can just go hang out with the guys,
And
have a
she
nice
also
meal.
knows it's one night every month.
Yep. Yep. Well, when you take into the account the other orders, it
Right.
adds up a little more than that.
Sure.
But yeah, so I think that's something as well. And of course, over here, we are seeing a lot more younger members joining as well because of the university scheme. The university scheme over here is massive. In September, actually, we're doing so it's my first time ever being a worshipful master.
First time being a master of a lodge.
Yes, so first time I don't know if you caught or what was able to be caught before it cut out, but so first time being a master and my first ritual is going to be a second degree that we're doing for a university lodge who has a candidate waiting in the wings.
Love it.
So
Love it.
and we've done that, the science fiction fantasy lodge, a lot of our meetings we've actually done that. We've done degrees for other lodges that have been, have candidates waiting.
So you guys also in the UK, you guys are you actively, I don't want to say promoting, but promoting masonry more than ever. Is that fair or no?
I think so. Of course, British tabloid press, they love us. We get mentioned every now and again. And United Grand Lodge of England has taken a firm stance now of, we're going to answer. And so they've, you guys probably saw a couple years ago when they published the full page ad in the paper saying, no, what you're saying is, BS. Here are the facts. So we've, kind of stop that stuff head on.
Love it.
But with the advertising side of it, our province has a trailer that you can, any Mason in the province can go ahead and ring them up and say, I'm hosting this event or there's this event going on that I'm going to set a booth up at. Could I have the trailer? And they'll send the trailer out for you and you can set it up and promote Masonry in the province.
And it's like a kit. The full
Yeah.
toolkit, you bring it out and you're ready to rock, turn and
Yeah.
go.
So, I mean, all over the trailer is loads of, photos and, links and QR codes about, Provincial Grand Lodge of Staffordshire, Freemasonry in general. And then inside the trailer, there's leaflets and, tablecloths. And I think there's a canopy as well with a square compass on it that you can use to kind of promote.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So before we get to the most important question of the podcast, if you could have a superpower, one superpower, what would it be and why?
Ooh.
You can't have a fantasy lodge and not be thinking about your superpower. Come on, man.
Oh, I don't know. That's the problem. There's so many to choose from. What do you choose? Invisibility, but then there's a lot of quirks about that. There's flight. Yeah, I honestly, I'm not certain. I Invincibility would be an interesting one. I just
Invincibility
saw.
or immortality? Which one?
Ooh, mixture of both. Well, yeah, you're saying pick one because I'm thinking I just saw Deadpool and Wolverine, so I'm thinking
Yeah,
along the lines of Deadpool. That would be, yeah, breaking the fourth wall.
right.
Realizing that we're, well, I don't want to say that we are in a simulation, but that whole idea, if you were in a simulation, being able to look out and be like, yeah, no, this is all wrong.
Right, right. That's funny. That's funny. So Yeah, that's we've heard a lot of we've heard time travel, invisibility, what people are thinking, and gosh, again, if you could hear what people are thinking, you would think your mind would be going off all the time, which would be alarming in
Time
itself.
time travel, I wouldn't have thought of as a superpower, but that would actually be a really fun one. I'd say, yeah, I'd go for that one. That'd be kind of cool.
But it might be the scariest because if
Yeah,
you do one thing different, did it change the whole cycle moving forward?
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Well, you'd learn pretty quickly, I hope.
oh yeah, yeah, and hopefully not at a part where it's like the person in your life, you're like, oh my gosh, maybe I won't meet this person now because I adjusted everything by 2 seconds.
Yep.
So now for the most important question of the podcast. I will place four things on the screen, Justin, and one of them have to go forever. It was never created, invented. So on the screen, you'll see four things: Star Trek, Star Wars, Game of Thrones, and Stranger Things. One of these series that has to go forever. It was never invented. And if it was never invented, you have this whole generation of insert name that was never around. Which one goes forever and why?
Well, I mean, this is kind of an easy one for me,
Okay.
largely because I've never seen it. And that would be Stranger Things.
Stranger Things. Okay.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
because I mean, I love Star Trek. I'm a huge Trekkie. You mentioned you saw the photo from our installation where I'm
Yes.
in a Star Trek Voyager jumpsuit at our festive board, and I mean I've got a Tom Paris commemorative plate back
Right.
here, which is a deep cut to Star Trek Lower Decks. Star Wars, I know usually Star Trek and Star Wars fans hate each other, but I love all sci-fi. So I'm a huge fan of Star Trek, Star Wars, Game of Thrones. We just finished House of the Dragon.
Nice. So, as we talked earlier, I've never seen any Star Treks, never seen any Star Wars. Game of Thrones, I have. I was disappointed with the last season. That bothered me a little bit. I thought it was hastily done. But I've not seen House of the Dragon. I'm waiting. I have seen Stranger Things. They lost me maybe in season two. The format's probably fine. So, but I don't think that I could argue with you on the Stranger Things because the other ones have such a cult following. And you wouldn't have Trekkies if it wasn't for that. So, Justin, thank you for taking your time out and joining the Old Fashioned Masonic podcast, my friend. Cheers.
Well, thank you very much, Brian.